Welcome to my channel. Today we visit the General Patton Memorial Museum at Chiriaco Summit near Palm Springs. This was the site of Camp Young, the desert training center that was set up in 1942 to provide an area for realistic desert training for the US Army. This place is much more than a single commander's biography. It's really a story about systems, how training, logistics, doctrine, and people came together before, during, and after the biggest armored campaigns of World War II. We do start with Patton himself, his early formation, his military identity, and the mindset that would later define his command style, speed, aggression, and relentless movement. But one thing I want to keep front and center in this walkthrough: history like this is never one person alone. Every famous operational moment sits on a much bigger foundation of staffs, units, planners, mechanics, and soldiers whose names most people never hear. These artifacts help anchor that reality. War isn't just tanks and headlines, it's administration, communication, supply, routine, fatigue, and endurance. And that brings us to the core context here: desert warfare. In 1942, Patton became the first commander of the Desert Training Center. The mission was straightforward and brutal: prepare troops to survive and fight effectively in desert conditions before they were sent into major combat theaters like North Africa. Even when exhibits jump across climates and equipment, the theme stays consistent. Terrain dictates outcomes. Heat, cold, dust, distance, these aren't side notes. They shape what armies can actually do. Mobility is everything in this story. Vehicles like this represent more than transport. They represent tempo. The side that moves faster, coordinates better, and sustains momentum usually controls the campaign. This map-style sequence is a good bridge into one of the most famous Patton-linked events, the Battle of the Bulge, when the German offensive erupted in December 1944. Third Army executed a rapid pivot north. Lead elements reached Bastogne on December 26, helping break siege conditions. That moment is iconic, but again, it wasn't magic and it wasn't one man. It was preparation, staff work, road movement under pressure, weather constraints, and unit-level execution at scale. This is one reason museum spaces like this matter. They slow us down enough to see the connective tissue between famous battles and the less glamorous systems that made them possible.
Just among these three divisional camps, there could be upwards of 50,000 men in training and
personnel, equipment, and geography all intersect here. Doctrine is only real when it can be carried by actual people under real conditions. And the broader World War II context matters too. Operational brilliance existed inside a war defined by massive human cost and moral catastrophe across multiple fronts. As we move through the museum, you can feel the pacing shift from biography to infrastructure to the machinery behind battlefield outcomes. This is one of the major highlights of this museum, that you can actually touch and feel the real armored vehicles and other supporting vehicles like jeeps, trucks, staff cars, and even anti-tank guns. For a fee, you can also take a ride on an actual tank. Logistics gets overlooked constantly. Fuel, maintenance, recovery, transport. Without those, armored doctrine collapses on day one. Here is the famous deuce and a half or 2.5 ton truck, the backbone of Allied logistics. Now we transition into the armor-heavy part of the story. Here we have the chassis of the famous M60 tank. We are going to go in and look at the driver area. Do you see the seat there? That's where the driver would be seated. Notice how close the shell rounds are to him. Inside, the turret views are especially useful. From outside, armor looks invincible. Inside, it's cramped, loud, mechanical, and intensely human. Crew coordination here is everything. And armor never fights alone. Artillery, recon, engineers, and transport are inseparable from tank success in any serious campaign analysis. Comms gear and field equipment remind us that information flow is often the real decisive edge. One major advantage the Allies during World War II was that all tanks had the ability to transmit and receive. The Germans only had command vehicles with the ability to transmit. That really tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. Out in the yard, the vehicles themselves show age, wear, and material history. These aren't abstract icons, they're machines that had service lives, limits, and maintenance burdens. The Desert Training Center was also a hub for innovation, like this Jeep with scaffolding so that a canvas cover would make it look like a tank from a distance. These were used to find out what distance a spotter plane would mistake one for a real tank. It is not just the bigger tanks that are featured in the museum. Here is an M5 Stuart light tank that was used in the middle part of the war. These were used for retreat operations and were the eyes and ears of the commanders out in the desert. When people talk about Patton tanks, precision matters. The Patton family naming clearly includes M46, M47, and M48. The M60 comes from that lineage, but wasn't formally standardized as Patton, even though people often use that label colloquially. Recovery and engineering vehicles are another underappreciated part of armored warfare. If you can't recover and repair, you can't sustain operational tempo. Same with trucks and support fleets. They're the bloodstream of any campaign. Here we have a M9 36 6x6 wrecker that is still in use today. Back inside, terrain and infrastructure displays reconnect us to first principles. Geography governs options. Commanders don't choose from infinite possibilities, they choose from what roads, weather, and supply lines allow. This display shows the landscape around the DTC, and how the Colorado River aqueducts influence the decision to have the center located here. The memorabilia sections are where the scale shrinks back to individuals. Photos, keepsakes, personal traces, necessary balance. Model battle scenes can look simple, but they're useful storytelling tools for translating operational language into visual intuition. And by this point, the emotional arc becomes clear. This museum is about capability, yes, but also memory. The uniforms and photos remind us that these were tangible things the men who fought remember those events by. Outside again, the memorial elements shift the tone from analysis to reflection. You move from steel to names, from tactics to consequences. That contrast is the point. Walls of remembrance line the walls to the museum compound with names of service members who died during the Vietnam War. Let us never forget them. If this walkthrough helped you see the General Patton Memorial Museum in a deeper way, share it with someone who cares about military history, and subscribe for the next museum deep dive. If you're traveling through the desert corridor in Southern California, this site is absolutely worth the stop. Peace is precious. War is hell. I'll see you at the next location.